It is 6 o'clock on the 21st of February, 2018, and we're calling the Santa Barbara Airport Commission February edition meeting to order. And with that, we will have the roll call, please.
Karen Kahn,
Present.
Kirk Martin,
Here.
Craig R. Curry, Carl Hopkins,
Here.
Bruce Miller,
Here.
Jim Wilson.
Here.
And changes to the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Next item is notices that on Friday, February 16th, 2018 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at Airport Administration. Public comment section. This is the section where any member of the public may address the Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled before them that same day. The total amount of time for public comments will be 15 minutes, and no individual speaker may speak for more than 2 minutes. Do we have any speaker slips?
No speaker slips.
No speaker slips. Liaison reports. Do we have our new liaison from the City of Santa Barbara? I see it's Jason Dominguez.
He's been appointed, but I don't see him yet in the audience. But should he join us later, maybe we can introduce him to Commission.
Okay, well, we welcome Council Member Jason Dominguez and look forward to meeting him. Goleta liaison does not appear to be here.
I don't see Mr. Bennett.
With that, we will move on to commission matters, which is the election of an officer. Recommendation that the commission reaffirm the chair election vote, which apparently did not have or could not be heard a second. So with that, I open nominations again, or I just ask for a second.
In view of the exemplary leadership exhibited over the past year, it's a great pleasure to renominate Ms. Kahn for chair.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Duly recorded.
Thank you. We're moving on now to the consent calendar. Do I?
Commissioner Kahn, Councilmember Jason Dominguez has joined us.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome. Come in.
We need to find him a chair.
We had moved rather quickly past liaison reports, and if you have one, we would be delighted to hear it and welcome you to being our representative from the Santa Barbara
and
City Council.
The other liaisons coming.
Oh,
What do I get to do with this? Hi, I'm Jason Dominguez,
Only for presentation.
council member for District 1 and your new liaison. So I'm happy to be here. It's a privilege to be the liaison and to work with you all. You're one of the hardest working bodies we have in the city and doing great work. So it's a pleasure to do this and an honor. So I'm just here to listen and watch and take any concerns that you have back to the city council and bring any concerns the city council have back to you. So that's about all I have to say. Is there anything that you'd like to share with me at this moment?
Not at this time, but thank you for joining us.
You bet. Keep up the great work.
I would say on behalf of the commission, we're really privileged to have such a great staff to work with. So.
Great. I'm glad to hear that.
welcome. We will look forward to acquainting you with some of the ins and outs of the airport, and we're very pleased with our staff and the very efficient and manner in which they run it. So we're very lucky. Anyone else have anything? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please join us.
And we see that Michael T. Bennett from Goleta has joined us, so we will offer him the microphone.
Thank you. Actually, I do have something very important to report. Breaking news. I sit on the Losan Board of Directors, and today we made the final vote on the retiming of the Surfliner. So it will be arriving in the morning appropriately in Santa Barbara and Goleta. And this is something that you might recall on Measure A. It was something that we worked very hard on to pursue. And it's only taken us 12 years to get there, but we're doing very, very well in this regard. So this started long before I ever got an SB CAG, and it goes back to the Measure D days. And so in any case, we've got the retimed liner, so people living in Ventura County can get on the train at a very low cost and come north and leave in the afternoon. And there'll be 2 trains you can return on, or you can use the bus, the Coastal Express, if you need a different time, which runs all day long. So there's other arrangements you can make. And the nice thing is that when you buy the ticket, it is usable both on the MTD for the last mile, which in Goleta will be from La Patera going to Patterson Avenue to Cottage Hospital. And another bus will be going from La Patera to the west out to Log Me In. So we'll be able to accommodate all the folks that work in either areas as far as the business corridor. And I think I've covered most everything. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
When does it
Great.
start?
Any questions?
When does it start?
It starts on Monday, April 2nd.
Very good. Well, we will look forward to its timeliness, and hopefully the 12 years will have been worth it.
Well, I just arrived on the train, and I actually arrived a couple of minutes early. That's how I'm here almost exactly on time.
Great. We'll just have to slow down and take longer to get to the reports section. All right, with that, we move on to the consent calendar.
I move that the Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the commission for January 17th and the rest of the consent calendar, including the minutes of the lease review subcommittee, the property management report, and the lease amendment with the High Sierra Grill.
Second the motion?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we waive the reading of the minutes and approve the consent calendar as listed.
I just, as a matter of form, I'm not sure, are we required to ask if there are changes to the consent calendar? I think we almost got there, but didn't quite get there.
We had changes to the agenda, but no.
No changes
No
to the
changes to
agenda.
consent calendar.
Okay. So do I hear a second to the motion?
Yeah, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have moved past the consent calendar. And that brings us to item 6, the administrative reports. Fiscal year 2018 mid-year financial report and P3 report.
Tonight, Tom Bullers, our administrative analyst, will give you an update on our mid-year.
Good evening, Airport Commissioners. I'm going to give you a little update on our fiscal year 2018 mid-year. So that covers the period July 1st, 2017 to December 31st, 2017. So just a few key indicators versus that same period in the prior fiscal year. Passengers are up about 5%. Parking revenues are up about 10%. On the downside, commercial airline fuel sales are down about 20%. Some of the anecdotal feedback we've gotten on that is that fuel is just cheaper in other parts of the country, so the airlines are flying their planes in full of fuel and not fueling up here as much as those other places. A few revenue highlights at second quarter, and these will continue through the year end too. We've hired a new operations manager who's going to be implementing our ground transportation program after the retirement of the previous one. It's kind of delayed that implementation. We've had some limited commercial industrial vacancies, so some strong revenues there. At the year end, we project the airline fuel sales will be down a bit and the GA fuel sales will be up a bit. And terminal revenue versus budget, parking will be down about 2% versus budget, but again, pretty strong versus the prior fiscal year. So just to orient you a little bit on our operating fund revenues, these left-hand columns starting at the top, commercial industrial leases, that's revenue that we generate from our commercial industrial buildings, mostly on the north side of Hollister. Terminal leases include things like parking and rental cars and concessions at the terminal. Non-commercial aviation really refers to non-commercial airlines. We're really talking about the GA community there. Commercial aviation is the commercial airline revenues, so terminal rental, fuel flowage fees, landing fees. And miscellaneous includes a little bit of income from the TSA Law Enforcement Officer Reimbursement Program, LEO program. And I'll point out one other thing here on the right-hand column. Just the way the math works here, a negative number is good and a positive number is bad. Not bad, but so just to highlight where a few of those things are happening, the limited commercial industrial vacancies lead to a positive variance of almost $150,000. The parking and ground transportation program are both included in those terminal leases. So we see a negative variance there of about $283,000. Increased GA fuel sales lead to about a $54,000 positive variance. Decreased airline fuel sales lead to about a $96,000 variance in commercial aviation. And then the TSA LEO reimbursement, so far we haven't had any indications that TSA is going to continue that program, so we anticipate that'll be down about a $28,000 variance. So taken all together, revenues at year end we project will be about 1% below budget. Switching over to the expenditures, salaries and benefits. This is vacant salary and benefits have had a lot of vacancy savings the last few years. It's a continued story here at the airport, and we'll see savings. We saw savings it's halfway through the year, and we'll see savings through the year end. Halfway through the year, we've also seen a little bit of a lag in payments for some of our utilities, some of our other contracts, to pay out 5 months of payments over a 6-month period. At year end, we'll also see some savings from the long-term Lot 2 shuttle. That ran for about 2 months, from a little before Thanksgiving to a little after the new year. So again, just to orient you here to some of these accounts on the left-hand side, material supplies and services includes things like ARF and engineering, and also allocated costs that the airport pays to downtown for legal services and accounting services. The special projects line item, the bulk of that is made up of the long-term Lot 2 shuttle. And debt service is the debt service on the terminal building. So again, just to point out a few of these bigger variances, vacancy savings about 4% for the year. Savings from the long-term Lot 2 shuttle, around 50%. And then overall about 3% savings on the expenditure side. So at the bottom line, we had a deficit about $765,000 midway through the year. At the year end, we're projecting a deficit of about $1.3 million. That's buffered by our reserves at the end of the last fiscal year of about $1.5 million. So kind of shifting here to the P3 program. We have 8 airport programs. We identified 56 major objectives. So far to date, we've completed 7 of 54. There's some objectives that are excluded from that calculation. So those major accomplishments, we've established some procedures for solicitation of the fixed base operator RFP, refocused some of our advertising budget on our direct nonstop destinations, added some extra charging stations in the terminal hold room, repainted our taxiway center lines, created an inventory of some of our signage on the runway and taxiways, completed a remodel of Building 333, and council certified our environmental impact report and adopted the airport master plan in December. A few that we didn't complete. This first one, the parking management contract and revenue control system, it wasn't completed by that August 31st date. The revenue control equipment is installed in all of our parking lots now, and you'll hear a little bit more about the parking management contract later this evening. A few other items were delayed or canceled. The marketing plan to lease 6100 Hollister, we just received bids for that project, so now we know what we're building and what we're going to be marketing. The property management system, we're going to be replacing some of that software. We went out to bid with some of our downtown departments and didn't receive an acceptable bid, so we're going to be rebidding that. And some shifts in strategy eliminated the need to find a champion to carry the message of Santa Barbara Airport's value. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions?
So I realize that your projected deficit is being absorbed by your above policy reserves, but I'm curious if they're taking any actions to try to tune operations to mitigate some of that.
They were
I
funded.
mean, it's still
I think-
eating into the above policy reserve. Right?
That's correct, and I believe a large part of that, and I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that it was for our capital program, and with with runway 725 reconstruction, when we received discretionary funding, that took more money out of our capital program, sort of increased the deficit overall.
And then there was an additional $400,000 to replace or repair the electrical over at 495 Fairview, the hangars over there.
So those were folded into the operating budget rather than the capital budget? Is that
They're funded from the operating budget.
okay?
It gets transferred into the capital
Yeah,
budget.
it comes from operating to capital.
So overall, I mean, you're accounting for it with those basically capital projects, but you're not anticipating changes, program changes?
I don't anticipate any operating changes. I do think that we're being very conservative on what will fall to the bottom line at year end, as every year, because in Tom's equation here, I think he's assuming that all materials and supplies will be expended, and we know for a fact that generally doesn't happen. But we're also anticipating that in the next fiscal year that we'll have increased revenues from properties. And should some of the properties that are now vacant be leased prior to the end of the fiscal year, that will also offset that deficit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, we move on to item 9, the parking management agreement with Republic Parking Systems.
Yes, and Deanna Zackerson will lead this item off with also some comments by the parking management firm.
Alrighty, good evening, Commissioners. We're here to talk about parking and some changes that are happening in our parking lots here at the airport. It's a very important business for us. And this evening we are hoping to ask for your approval of a new management contract for an operator of our parking lots. So just to give you the quick little overview, and I'm sure you're well familiar with this, but we have essentially 3 parking lots. We have the short-term terminal parking lots with about 198 stalls. Some of those are handicap spots. Some are for close-in employee parking. We have the long-term terminal lot, which has about 680 stalls. And then we also have the long-term remote lot, Lot 3, it's actually Lot 3, Lot 2, excuse me, across the street off of Hollister. That's the former drive-in. And that is not being used for public parking currently. It is being used for storage of car dealership vehicles, which is turning out to be a very good source of revenue for us. So we have just about every car dealership in Santa Barbara now storing cars in that parking lot. So it's a great use for us. But all of these lots are managed by our outside parking vendor. So parking is managed by an outside company that we contract with. Essentially how it works, it is a management agreement, which means that we reimburse that operator for all of the expenses to run parking. So that's everything from salaries and benefits for the employees, supplies, ticket stock, computers, office paper, you name it, whatever it takes to operate the business. And that includes insurance and workers' comp and some of those things. Even though we are reimbursing those costs, it is important that we work with a good operator that helps us keep those costs in check. It's always a balance between making sure you're running a smooth operation and really watching the bottom line on expenses. So for all of that, the company receives a management fee that we pay to them monthly. The management fee is essentially their profit, but it is also their corporate management, accounting systems and that kind of thing, auditing, all those kinds of services that they provide to us, and oversight, regional and national oversight. So there we go. Parking, as it is actually at most airports, is one of the most significant generators of revenue for an airport. In our case, it generates a little more than $3 million annually, so that's pretty significant. We have actually looked at the model by which we manage the parking to make sure that we're really evaluating if we're using the right model for it. So, for example, as we looked at this potential transition, we did look at what it would cost us if we managed it with city-employed staff, for example. And we really came to the conclusion that it works well for us to use an outside vendor because they're very specialized at running parking facilities, particularly in airports. And it's really sort of not a core function of running the terminal. It's something that is well managed by other experts. We recognize, though, that choosing a good operator for parking is really important because for the customer, they park in our parking lots because they perceive a value to that. I mean, there are lots of other choices. You could choose to come by cab, by Uber, have somebody drop you off. So if you're parking at the airport, we want to make sure that folks are receiving value for money for that. And that's the security of the lots, the convenience, and of course the customer service that they get. So this was a new opportunity, a new business opportunity that we put to the marketplace. We had a contract with ABM Parking for, it was, I believe, a 3-year agreement with a couple of options on it. All of the options had been exercised, so essentially the contract was expiring. And it was set to expire at the end of August last year. It takes us a little bit of time to do a competitive request for proposals, so we extended that contract just a little bit so that we could initiate and complete that process. So we did issue that request for proposals, and we received 6 proposals from parking companies, all with experience of running parking operations in airports. So we got a great response from that. We selected Republic Parking, which is a new operator for us. The incumbent, ABM, did compete for the opportunity, but ultimately we settled on Republic, and we had some specific criteria in that RFP by which we made that choice. Their real strengths were revenue control. It sounds straightforward, but really it's a little bit more complex to just make sure that every ticket that comes in the gate, you're getting paid for on the back end. So it's really making sure that we're controlling the revenue at all steps through that process. Customer service, I'm sure Republic can touch a little bit on the great customer service training that they have. They bring in folks from their corporate office to train the employees. And then the regional support. No airport wants to be an island, and we need the regional support that comes from a larger resource within the operation. And we felt that they were the strongest on all of those points. So I'm going to introduce to you the key staff that will be assisting us. Bob is out of the Chattanooga head office. Don Barrett is their operations manager, and then Graham Leach is their regional manager, who's based out of Seattle, but manages several airport properties here in California. So I know there's Bob. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Bob, and then we hope that you will give us the confidence of a vote on this contract.
Thanks, Deanna. I appreciate that, and we really appreciate the confidence and the recommendation from staff. Republic serves 72 airports in the United States, 3 more in Canada, and a total of 5 airports currently in the state of California. We have significant amount of resources in the state of California. We have a office in San Francisco and an office in LA. We employ more than 1,000 employees in the state. Again, not particularly at the airports, but in San Francisco and in our urban properties. Graham Leach will be our regional manager. He operates out of our Seattle office. Graham manages 14 airports in the western states of the U.S. And then Don Barrett is our senior VP of operations, and he manages about 30 airports across the Midwest and in the West. So we are just thrilled with the opportunity, and if y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Any questions? I have one. Which airports in California do you manage?
Monterey, Charles Schultz in Sonoma, Bakersfield, Redding, and Eureka. So,
Okay, so all small.
Actually, Eureka, I think, has a new name, though. It's Redwoods. I'm not mistaken. Is it Redwoods? I don't know. Just for a marketing
Eureka
purpose.
Arcata?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think they want to be called that anymore. So.
That's actually where they're located, but that's okay.
No, I agree. But
It is.
trying to
what it
go
is.
region.
Any further questions? Okay. With that, do we get to have further presentations, or you are?
No, that was it.
Okay, great. Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Welcome.
Thank you.
I thought it was worth pointing out, I'm not sure I saw that in the slides, a couple points that you do cover in the memo and we did talk about in the subcommittee. And one factor was the vendor's experience with our current parking equipment, which
Yes.
is paid for by the airport and it will be retained. And then also that this vendor is planning on interviewing the existing employees and hopefully retaining all those that are interested.
Right, we interviewed, I think, several people today, and then we're going to be here tomorrow as well. And Graham's actually going to be here through Friday, doing all the interviews. So,
Very good.
Any other comments? Do I hear a,
I move that we approve the parking management agreement with Republic Parking Systems.
Second?
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to item number 10, the fixed base operator redevelopment update.
Once again, Madam Chair, Deanna is going to introduce this item and also our consultants that we have selected.
All right, Commissioners, good evening again. Have the pleasure of talking about the work that is now commencing on the FBO redevelopment. We've been talking about it for a number of months, starting with our request for qualifications last year to hire a consultant to help us with this very significant piece of work. So we completed that, as you know, and then at the end of last year, City Council approved some short-term extensions to our current FBO operators in order to continue operations, have that continuity while we manage that process. So I'm very pleased today that we have 3 consultants from Lee Fisher who will be helping us with this. And Lee Fisher is a great firm. They've obviously worked with Santa Barbara before in the terminal project. Really work at airports all over the country. I've worked with them at other airports as well in the past. So I think we're in good hands and a good partnership with Lee Fisher. And I'd like to turn it over to them, and they will tell you a little bit more about themselves and the work we're planning to do together. All right.
That button right there, okay. Madam Chair and Commissioners, how are you? My name is Tracy Thompson. I'm a Managing Director at Lee Fisher, and I'm going to kick off this very short presentation, and then we'll be pleased to answer any questions that you have at the end of our presentation about ourselves and this program. So Lee Fisher is a entity that has been in the aviation business for over 70 years, closer to 75 years, and our sole mission in life at beginning and all the way through has always been aviation management consulting, specifically for airports. We are owned by Jacobs Engineering Group, and as a result of that ownership, we have the depth and breadth of many, many more people than Lee Fisher ever was able to hire on its own as resources for all of our aviation projects. So basically have two core lines of business within Lee Fisher in the aviation sector, and that's business consulting and airport facilities planning. And these two disciplines together should be able to provide all of our aviation clients the expertise that they need in their airport projects and business programs. So I think I did. So we are pleased to be your consultants for your FBO redevelopment program. And we call these programs and not projects because a project sometimes is interpreted as only a sticks and bricks project. You have a beginning and ending. But the FBO operation at airports is an ongoing program. Their business partners is an ongoing enterprise and entity of airports. So it is a program, and we're pleased to help support the airport staff and this commission with taking a look at the overall program and getting you from where you are today to where you want to be with this particular enterprise at the airport. We are currently in phase one. We're just about to kick off phase one of this program, the FBO redevelopment program, which is our situational analysis, due diligence, and benchmarking analysis. And as at the phase two demonstrates the other phases that will be coming later on in the year. The financial and leasehold development scenarios, both of those analysis will be ongoing concurrently. The result of that information will result in RFP process and the ultimate selection of your FBO operators for the future of the airport. But let me tell you a little bit about our team. So that's a picture of me a few years ago, so it looks pretty good. I am a managing director at Lee Fisher. I am an attorney by training. I am in recovery. But I have been in aviation for 30 years with experience at American Airlines. And of course, I was on executive staff at DFW Airport before becoming a consultant with Lee Fisher 13 years ago. So I assist our team and our aviation clients in business strategies, lease negotiations. It's aviation, aeronautical, as well as non-aeronautical, the land side, rental cars, commercial development. But we're just airline aviation geeks, and so I love working on aeronautical projects. I'm going to let the other folks that we brought here from Lee Fisher and Jacobs introduce themselves as they come up. But you'll see on our little resumes here, we put a couple of airports where we're currently working on projects that are very similar or have a lot of similar characteristics to the program that we have here at Santa Barbara. So currently I'm working at Deer Valley Airport, which was a general aviation airport in the Phoenix Sky Harbor system, and I'm working on their renegotiation of their FBO contracts there. And at McKinney National Airport, which is a large GA airport in the Dallas area, just north of Dallas, large corporate presence there, I'm helping that GA airport client in an entire strategic business plan for them, which includes not only their FBO operations, but hopefully the introduction of commercial service. So those are some similar projects. In 30 years of aviation, I've done a lot of projects similar to this, but those are two that I'm working on right now. In the interest of time, I'm going to very quickly introduce a team member who's not with us today, and this is Justin Powell. He's one of our sub-consultants. He's a former Lee Fisher employee, currently has his own company. I've worked with Justin on many projects when we were colleagues at Lee Fisher. So he's one of our trusted sub-consultants. He'll be doing the benchmarking analysis and a lot of the financial modeling on the FBO program here. Under contract with Lee Fisher, he has worked on Brown Field, which is out of the San Diego system, and doing a business plan for that general aviation airport. And he just finished up working with me for the Fort Worth airports, which was Spinks, Meacham, and Alliance, on their overall strategic business plans, in particular on their FBO operations. So we have a lot of specific expertise in this subject matter. And Justin, you may be hearing from him or seeing him. He's not here tonight, but he's on the team. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Sedlak, who is here, and I'll be sitting down, but I'm welcome to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you, Tracy. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Sedlak. I am the Director of Engineering Director of Aviation for Jacobs Engineering, located here in Southern California, based out of LA. I've been with Jacobs 3 years. Before that, I was the head of planning and development for Long Beach Airport. During my time there, we did a comprehensive airfield geometry study, which involved reconfiguring the entire airfield, including impacts to the FBOs based on the airfield. We actually eliminated 5 hotspots through that process. There's opportunity with this FBO redevelopment to look at addressing hotspot 3 on your airfield, so we're going to look at options to do that when we get to phase 2 in the lease development scenarios. And then I'm also currently assisting up at San Jose International Airport on another runway incursion mitigation study. So during phase 1, I will serve as the quality management, additional eyes and ears from a director level to assist Tracy and Justin as we go through the situational analysis and benchmarking, and then I'll lead the engineering and design efforts in phase 2. So with that, I'll turn it over to our project manager, Justin Ritter.
Thank you, Jeff. Chair, Commission, thank you so much for the opportunity to make this presentation today. My name is Justin Ritter, so I'll be the day-to-day project manager on this project. I'm also a facility planner by practice, and so I'll be helping you through the day-to-day facility planning and a lot of the elements that we'll dive into here in a second. I have about 13 years of experience in the aviation industry, 7 of them with Lee Fisher and Jacobs. I'm a general aviation pilot as well. Although I have 2 young girls now, so I mostly think about general aviation flying rather than flying as much as anything else. But what I've been doing for the past 13 years, mostly airport master planning, sustainability planning, aviation demand forecasting and such. A couple of recent relevant projects that I've worked on that apply to your airport here as well. At Colorado Springs Airport, they were interested in adding an FBO to their general aviation side of their airports, commercial service airport, much like yours with the separate general aviation side of the airport. They were interested in adding a different FBO to that general aviation side. However, FBOs coming to airport administration could not define their costs. What is my cost going to be on day 1? What is my cost going to be in year 5, year 10? And so what we did is we did development scenarios for the general aviation side of the airport to help them define their costs, drill in what utilities are going to have to be brought in, what cut and fill is going to have to be done, what infrastructure can be done to help you get started, and what infrastructure will you have to invest in. And so they were able to define their costs. They ended up getting a new FBO into that general aviation side after we put together those scenarios and defined those costs for them. Another project I worked on, who actually Jeff Sedlak and I worked on together up in Northern California at Auburn Airport, just east of Sacramento. We helped them develop their RFP for a new FBO at that airport. They were having some trouble really on the customer service side of their FBOs, and so they wanted to kind of go out for a new RFP to kind of improve their customer service, and so we helped them put together that RFP process for them, and I think they've improved their customer service at that airport today. So we'll stop talking about ourselves. Let's focus on you guys now. So what is phase 1 going to look like? Tracy kind of touched on what the overall program is going to look like. We're kicking off today phase 1. So phase 1 is really kind of getting our arms around your situation here and getting our arms around the FBO situation in the local market as well. So we'll do what's called a situation analysis. We'll review your FBO agreements, review FBO agreements at similar airports that are similar in size and similar scope to your airport as well. Understand really what elsewhere is happening in the industry on that side. We'll validate your aviation demand forecast and your facility requirements. You recently completed a master plan, understood, but some of the forecasting data was taken from 3 or 4 years ago probably. And so we'll take a new look at that. It won't be another approval process, but we'll take another look at that and make sure that we're on the right track for the next 20 years on that end. And the benchmarking analysis, that'll be led, as Tracy said, by Mr. Justin Powell. This is really one of his core competencies. So what we'll do is we'll compare the financial performance of your FBOs here to some of the FBOs that exist at these 4 airports that are listed here. These were specifically identified for having similar operations and similar scope and obviously similar regions, some of the cases as well, and a similar customer base, most importantly. So what the benchmarking would look at would, for example, revenue per acre, revenue per based aircraft for some of these FBOs. An example of some of the benchmarking items we'll look at for these 4 airports. And then the stakeholder engagement. As Tracy mentioned, that starts today, and that's a continuous process throughout both phase 1 and phase 2, making sure everybody's involved from the beginning and making sure everybody has the information they need throughout the entire process. So this is phase 1, and then we'll jump in phase 2. First of all, I'll show you the phase 1 project schedule. So right now what we're aiming for is early May deliverable of the market assessment, benchmarking analysis, and the situation analysis. Sometimes the benchmarking can take longer just because you're getting information from other airports, and this is important to us, but we got to make sure they know it's important to them as well, because some of the information is helpful to them as well. So the benchmarking analysis can sometimes stretch the schedule, but this is the schedule we're aiming for right now for phase 1, and at that point we'll jump into phase 2 of your program. That's all we have. Again, we really appreciate your time. Thank you for letting us share our qualifications and background and some details on the phase 1 of this, and we're looking forward to working with you. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions? Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much for your time.
And that brings us to item 11, the automobile dealership at 6210 to 6290 Hollister Avenue.
Yes, Commission Chair Andrew Vermont will do the presentation, and we also have a speaker slip from Peter Imhoff with the City of Goleta after Andrew does his presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Airport Commission. I'm going to go a little bit over the site history for the parcel that I'll be discussing, and then I'll talk about the new development that was approved by Planning Commission 2 weeks ago. I'll talk a little bit about the traffic analysis because I think that's important to what follows, which is an appeal of Planning Commission's approval that'll be at City Council at a future date. So for background, in 1972, the automobile dealership that had originally been at the location of 6290 Hollister, so that's Hollister Avenue and La Patera Lane, was constructed by Vista Volkswagen. By 1998, it became a Jeep dealership and was included as a structure to remain in the Airport Industrial Specific Plan. When that auto dealership closed late last decade, it sat vacant for a time and then was eventually demolished to preserve that area as runway protection zone pursuant to FAA guidance. And then also just last year, as part of the Airport Master Plan adoption, Council made a slight zone change that I'll go over quickly. So that if you may recall, for 1971 to 2013, we had an auto dealership that looked something like that. There's the interim guidance memo that details those requirements. So the blue shows what had been the airport operations and approach zone prior to December, which does not line up with, you see the little red line there, that's runway protection zone. So all we did was rezone it so that it was it lined up with the runway protection zone. This resulted in a slight increase in the number of acreage that was in the airport approach and operation zone and a slight decrease in what was in the industrial zone. So it did not result in an intensification of the zoning map. So the new proposed, now approved development was to construct two buildings that would comprise an automobile dealership. One 26-foot tall two-story building and another 30-foot tall one-story building, total 40,000 square feet. It also install a lot of new landscaping. There'd be fill to raise the site above base flood elevation. So this is the project site. You see it's a slightly odd-shaped parcel because it needs to respect the runway protection zone, and then there's also the crime lab on David Love Place, that's DOJ on the map, that also cuts a little portion out there. Also included in the proposal, as discussed earlier, is the continued use of the remote lot, long-term lot 2, for storage of vehicles. So this is the site plan. It's kind of difficult to read at this scale, but there's two buildings there in the middle, and then the back side of those two buildings, you see all those little auto bays. Those are service bays. The principal access would be off of Hollister on that paved center line that takes you into Porte-Cochere between the two buildings. This is the Chrysler floor plan. Again, at this scale, it's not terribly easy to read. The important thing to note is there's service in the back and that there's a mezzanine with more offices and a break room upstairs. This is the street elevation at the top, and then on the bottom is an interior elevation if you're in the Porte-Cochere looking at the side of the service bays and the sales at the front. The Infinity floor plan, that's the other building that's to the east, is a similar arrangement with the sales at the front and service in the back. So on February 8th, the Planning Commission approved a development plan for this project, and it added conditions for some bus shelters, car carrier, loading and unloading location, and then also included a request that the applicant add solar panels to the building. Now, the traffic analysis is convoluted because it is sort of two-headed. You need to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and you also have to comply with the Airport Industrial Area Specific Plans, specifically Policy VC2, which requires that any project that generates net new trips contribute to the Goleta Transportation Improvement Plan, and identifies projects at Los Carneros and US 101 southbound and Hollister and Fairview Avenues. So the net new trips, we take out the trips that we calculated had been generated by the Jeep dealership. We also, and we add in the trips that the new project would generate, and we come up with 67 net new afternoon rush hour, PM peak hour trips. So these are our two intersections that the policy obligates us to contribute to. So there's a condition of approval from the Planning Commission's approval that required a payment for a proportionate share to the Goleta Transportation Improvement Plan. Traffic study concluded that there was no new significant traffic impact pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. Also did not identify a contribution to a significant cumulative impact. It did identify tripping one of the traffic warrants that could justify a signal at David Love Place and Hollister Avenue. However, because of the proximity between the light at Lopez and the light at La Patera, be perhaps too many lights within a 2,500 foot distance. So transportation public works staff did not support that and instead came up with an alternative design that is called a worm in the intersection of David Love Place and Hollister Avenue. It allows left turns off of Hollister but does not allow left turns onto Hollister. So vehicles leaving the site will either navigate through on Wallace Becknell, the new road, or will turn right out on to Hollister and then make a U-turn to head toward Old Town Goleta or Fairview Avenue if they choose to. So yesterday we received an appeal letter from the City of Goleta that asserts that the CEQA analysis was inadequate. It provided new cost estimates for the identified projects and also stated that the Hollister and 217 roundabout projects ought to be included in the suite of projects that are required to be mitigated by the policy VC2. So the next steps for this project are sort of twofold. On one hand, the applicant still needs to go back to the Architectural Board of Review for final approval of their design and landscape plan. But also for the development plan, council has 21 days, now 20 days, to set an appeal date. And then once they schedule that, they will need to take action either to uphold the Planning Commission's approval or to rescind the development plan. So that's my presentation. Thanks.
Questions before we have our speaker?
The next to the last slide, the one that talked about the roundabout, had a 12.5 or 12.35 million. What is that number?
That is the total project cost. That's not the cost that Goleta is asking for.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
And that roundabout is down there a couple miles past Old Town, is that right?
Just past Old Town, the City of Goleta has proposed 2 roundabouts for the on-ramps and off-ramps of 217. It's called a dumbbell interchange.
I see.
Because it kind of looks like a dumbbell with the 2 traffic circles on either side and then an underpass.
I see. So it seems far from proximate to this location.
It's the entire traffic analysis is a little bit convoluted, but that's The original mitigation measure that generated policy VC2 obligated the airport to contribute to roadway extensions through Old Town Goleta that would connect to 217. Back in the 90s, they were either considering diamond interchanges or traffic lights on 217. That's no longer being considered, and so the project was obligated to contribute to Eckwell Street extension from Fairview to Kellogg, and they're saying that the 217 roundabouts should be considered a part of that.
Any other questions? And we have thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. Peter Imhoff with City of Goleta.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Peter Imhoff, the Planning Director for the City of Goleta, and thank you for acknowledging the City of Goleta's concerns in the staff report and in the presentation tonight. I'll keep my remarks brief, and I just want to highlight that there is an appeal pending, as you heard. The City of Goleta does have a number of concerns with this project, which we raised in the appeal. We don't feel that the environmental analysis or the mitigation identified is adequate to address the impacts of this project, in particular the traffic impacts. These are similar to the concerns that we raised with respect to the 6100 Hollister Avenue project. And broadly speaking, the projects that occur within the specific plan area connected to the airport within the City of Santa Barbara do affect the City of Goleta. They have real and material effects on the City of Goleta. Those are of concern to us. Those are things that we want to partner with the City of Santa Barbara on and resolving. We're still very interested in participating in your planning process and in having a voice in the planning of these projects, and we're certainly hopeful that we'll be able to reach some kind of a resolution that involves a partnership in dealing with these issues. And we're certainly hopeful that the update of the airport industrial area specific plan will afford us an opportunity to have that kind of a voice. And we're pleased to see that the airport does acknowledge that the specific plan's vision is no longer reflective of the airport staff's assessment of needs due to a host of changes in this area, such as the adoption of the airport master plan and new legal requirements. For better or for worse, the City of Goleta and the City of Santa Barbara, we are linked at the hip. We're neighbors, and we have to work together to address these issues. So my purpose in commenting tonight is really just to say that these issues are still out there, and how this development fits with neighboring jurisdictions is an important aspect of how these projects go forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, we come to the taxiway H extension.
I have one question.
Okay.
I'm sure that this will be covered, but the solar, the panels will once again be reviewed by the FAA to ensure that there's no glare to pilots coming in on either of the parallel runways?
So the auto dealership project did go through the 7460 obstruction analysis, which includes a glare study, and that glare study would need to be revised if they were going to include solar panels. That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we will move on to item 12, the taxiway H extension project.
Yes, and tonight we have Owen Thomas doing the presentation on Taxiway Hotel, which, as you know, is one of the major projects in our recently adopted master plan.
Okay, hi, yeah, I'm Owen Thomas, an engineer here at the airport, and I'm going to talk about the Taxiway H extension plan. This is a big component of the master plan. How do I make this thing advance? That one? Ah, okay.
Could you move the mic up a little?
Sure. Is that a little better? Okay. So the master plan was approved in December, and the Taxiway H extension project is a key component of the plan, which will hit on 2 of the 4 elements shown there. Primarily, it's a safety improvement project, but it also will affect the GA improvements and circulation in the airport. As far as safety goes, the FAA has established a runway incursion team, and they've identified the intersection of taxiway Charlie there with the circle on the top kind of towards the middle with the main runway as a hotspot, which is really an area of that's has higher than desirable potential for runway incursion. And it was really created when the military extended the runway to the west initially back in the 50s or 60s. That main runway ended right there at Charlie, and it was extended to the west. And at a later time, the taxiway A was extended to the west, the parallel taxiway there that goes full length. And actually, taxiway H was constructed, I think, in the 70s later on, but it was not constructed full length. And so now any traffic from the north side needs to cross at Charlie there to get to the west end of the runway. So all the north side traffic crosses the runway, and really the primary goal of the project is to simply reduce the number of runway crossings. So in the master plan, several airfield recommendations were put forward. Taxiway H, which we're talking about here, you can see the extension of taxiway H to the west there in red. It was really done in a very conceptual manner. And you can see the extension there. Here's a more detailed picture of that. And in about 3 weeks, we're going to be going to City Council with a contract for preliminary design of this extension. And we're really going to be trying to identify issues that come up with the extension, one of them being the glide slope will need to be relocated. And we'll be developing information that's needed for environmental review. This area that the taxiway cuts through contains probably somewhere between 8 and 15 acres of wetlands. And being in the coastal zone, impacting wetlands is a big deal. And as part of this project, we're going to need to identify exactly what type of wetland we'll be impacting and quantifying the full impacts. We'll also be developing some potential mitigation for those impacts and meeting with the agencies to discuss that. So as this part of this contract that's going to City Council, we'll be refining the alternatives and really generating the information that we need to go for environmental review. So the next step when we're done with this would be to go to the City of Santa Barbara for full environmental review, and then 2020 Coastal Commission, and if we get approval there, we would finish the design and then construct the extension in 2022. This particular contract is for $132,000 that's going to City Council, and the project, the total project cost we're estimating now, which is really a loose estimate, $15 million. So it's a big project, but it'll have some great improvements for the airport.
You might mention the FAA funding part before anybody jokes.
Right. What is the joint expected to be, 90% from the FAA?
90% for
Good.
FAA, and we've been in discussions with FAA planning for our airport capital improvement program that we submit to FAA for a couple of years, discussing this, and also in those discussions asking for discretionary revenue, because as you know, we get about $2.7 million a year in our airport improvement program, which is a grant that we are entitled to receive. But for a project this size, we would need discretionary. And it is a safety project, which puts it at the highest level of consideration for FAA. So we're working with them, and part of the schedule is designed based on those discussions and the realization that the master plan had a project level or a program level EIR, and now we'll need to do the project-specific EIR and meet any NEPA requirements as well.
Any questions?
Well, I'll just say, I realize it's been a tremendous amount of work even just to get us this far in this, what's really a very important safety project. I think a lot of pilots would recognize that intersection, I think it's the Charlie 725 intersection, is really, it's very deceptive and potentially, can have tragic consequences the way that's set up. So it's really great to see this move forward. I'm sorry Mr. Lincoln isn't here to appreciate it, because I know that was a big concern for him for decades, and a real desire to see this happen. So
that's true.
I think it's great to see this getting this far.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask if the amount of wetlands concerned with this project exceeds what we have had to deal with in the past, or it's pretty much commensurate with the shifting the runway to the west process that we did in the past?
Actually, I'll ask Andrew to come forward, because he keeps tabs on all of that.
Madam Chair, I would anticipate that it would be a lot less. We still need to do a delineation out at the site. If the entire site were wetland, which doesn't seem likely, then we would have a mitigation obligation comparable to the runway relocation. It's quite likely that it's a mixture of, once we get down to 100th of an acre mapping, a mixture of vernal pools and grassland, and so our mitigation ratio is expected to be less.
And does this, as far as the Coastal Commission is concerned, because it's further from the coast than, say, that runway shift, put us in a little bit more favorable position, because we're not quite as close to the coast with this particular project?
I don't know that it makes it more or less favorable. I think the fact that we're not relocating a creek simplifies the mitigation requirements considerably. But really, what becomes the conversation with Coastal Commission staff and ultimately the Commission is the mitigation ratio and what the new mitigation project can contribute, that is what environmental improvement that you can make to offset the impact. And so just that it's south of Hollister means it's of their interest.
Thank you.
Is there anything you can do to make the wetlands wet?
Well, I think at the moment it might be better that they stay dry for a while, but no, sorry.
Any other questions? Okay. And with that, we move on to the item 14, Santa Barbara Airport Award of Contracts for Construction of Light Industrial Buildings at 6100 Hollister. Did we get there?
The repairs, the top one.
Repairs. Got it. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair and Commission, Deanna just disconnected. We have Leif Reynolds, our project engineer, who's working on both of these projects. And so I've asked him to give you an updated or status report on where we stand.
There we go. Good evening, Airport Commissioners. I'm glad I didn't have to do this without the slides, so thank you, Deanna. This is a presentation first on the 495 South Fairview electrical repair project. Briefly, the hangar was originally built in 1968. There's 160,000 square feet of hangar space, 50,000 square feet of office space, and the entire leasehold reverts to the city ownership on May 9th, 2018.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Quick question. Is that 50,000 square feet in this hangars, or is that the building in the back?
It includes the space, the mezzanine area in the hangars, as well as the lean-to, and then the building has 30,000 square feet. So the 50 includes all office space that's considered office space in the facility.
Thank you.
The hangars are 40,000 apiece. Okay, so there's a picture of the original switchgear, and it still has the nameplate from 1968 when it was installed, and that's what we will be replacing. In August of 2016, the electrical switchgear failed, and when that size switchgear fails, it's a big deal. So when it did fail, Edison cut power to the facility. The tenant did try to proceed with the repair, but to repair a 50-year-old piece of electrical equipment, you have no guarantees, and you have to get it listed after you repair it. And so there's a very good chance that your repair is for naught and it's not listed, and then you've spent money not wisely. So she tried to repair it but decided not to. In September of 2017, the city decided to proceed with the replacement of the switchgear. We agreed with her that repair was not the right track to go down. So we did a design, and on February the 2nd, we received bids for the replacement of the switchgear. We received 5 bids. Imperial Electric, right here in Goleta, was the low bidder at $625,000, and you can see the bids went up from there. Purchase order was issued in February, early February. The contractor has already submitted their switchgear submittal to us. That's a 100 and some page document outlining all of the components of the switchgear. That's review is ongoing. We review that, the design engineer, and then it also goes to SCE, who reviews it. Once that is approved by both the city and SCE, the new switchgear will be ordered and installed. To fabricate switchgear like this could take up to 4 months. It's a big piece of equipment. Once we get that delivered here, we will already have the new foundation constructed for the switchgear. And as I have the note down there, it's in the flood zone, and as we know from previous presentations, the terminal, our airfield electrical vault, it has to be raised above the flood zone in that particular area. We're 3 feet below the base flood elevation, and new city floodplain ordinance requires us to put it 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So we'll have a 4-foot pad that will house the switchgear, which is about 20 by 30 foot. So it's kind of like building a house foundation for it. And that is the status of the electrical repair project. Please.
I noticed was a very significant difference between the low bid and the high bid. Is that typical, or did that surprise you that there was so much variance in those?
Wait till you see the bids from Hollister. It's hard to predict in this bidding climate. This was more expensive than we predicted it would be, and I think this was bid right after the floods and the fire, and I know there's a $90,000 difference between the low and the next, but Imperial Electric, as you may know, is right across the street on Los Caneros. PB Electric is in Rancho Cordova, so that might have something to do with it. Brannon's in Santa Maria. Taft is local. National High Voltage is not local. So I really can't explain the difference between the low and the next bid. It doesn't alarm me, no.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask how many people were asked to bid as opposed to how many responded?
We had a mandatory job walk because we wanted to show all of the people the existing gear and what it entailed, and I think we had 10 electrical contractors show up to mandatory job walk. We advertise online as well as in the paper, and we had a very good showing, and so 5 of them chose to bid, which is a very good turnout for us right now.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Now we can move to item 14, which is the Santa Barbara Airport Award of Contracts for the Construction of Light Industrial Building, 6100 Hollister.
This project, as you know, has been one that we've been working on for several years, and we were able to go forward with the bidding process, and so this will give you a preview of what the bid looks like and what we're going to get under construction soon.
Thank you, Hazel. This project, I've been here before. It was a while ago, and you're probably wondering, well, what have we done between now and then? Well, we'll tell you what we've done, but in a short story, you know, it's been bid and we're ready to award, so we've made a lot of progress. We came to Airport Commission October 10, 2016. That was the same week that we got our Planning Commission approval for the project. Since that time, on just right after the commission approval, the City of Goleta appealed the Planning Commission approval, and then it went to April 11, 2017. The City of Santa Barbara denied the appeal and upheld the approval of the project. The City of Goleta then filed a lawsuit challenging the council's approval. The lawsuit is not settled, and it's awaiting a court date. We are proceeding with the project, as the lawsuit is regarding the payment of fees, not the project itself. So on this project, we received 2 bids, and we all would have liked to receive more. Tomar Construction is out of Santa Paula. Lash Construction is, of course, in Santa Barbara. Council is scheduled to award on March 6th. The discrepancy of the bids here is far higher. I'm not concerned about this discrepancy. I've talked to both contractors, and it's simply a matter of, you know, what the contractors believe their production can be. And I don't know how one can think they're that much faster than the others, but it's a pretty big range, and we have worked with Tomar Construction on the field before. They did a fine job, so we are recommending award to Tomar.
Excuse me, what was your estimate going into the bidding process? I believe that you typically estimate how much you think it will be.
We do estimate that, and we have we bid this project with a base bid and 3 bid alternates, because to award the project we have to have enough funds in the budget for what is bid. So we start with a base bid, that's the basis of award, and then we can add on the others. So our estimate for the base bid, which is, you don't see the base bid number there, that's base bid plus alternative 1, was about $1 million less than they bid. So we had 2 professional estimates done prior to opening, but they were both done back in 2016. One of them was right where our estimate was. We had a second one done, and it was significantly higher. We were kind of in the middle, and the bids came in just above the middle. So I think the bidding climate now is not as favorable as it was back in 2016, early 2017, when we originally hoped to bid. But they're not as high as our high estimate was, but they're certainly higher than our first estimate.
And how many buildings is this?
This is 3 buildings, 3 out of 9, and I'll show that to you in just a minute.
Sorry?
No problem. Okay, so we had 47,000 square feet approved for in the development plan. That's 9 buildings. This bid allows for building 1, and I'll show you the site plan in a moment. It's 3,700 square feet, and that's the retail building on the corner of Lopez and Hollister. Building 2 is 4,400 square feet. That's light industrial, and it's kind of attached to building 3 right across the Paseo, which is also 4,400 square feet, light industrial. It also includes all of the stormwater treatment and landscape for the site. Recall, and I do have a slide, the stormwater treatment occupies the entire frontage of Hollister from the new sidewalk we're putting in to the buildings. So it's a big part of the project, and we're doing the entire stormwater treatment as part of this project. It also includes the parking lots for about half the site and the sidewalk and street lighting in the public right-of-way around the perimeter of the site.
And maybe you have drawings that show this, but stormwater treatment brings to mind plants and, or not plantings, but, you know, equipment. That's really retention basins and drainage.
Yes, I will have a slide that shows that, and you are correct. This slide, very briefly, is a rendering of the direct relief building that's immediately behind our project. And the view on top, we are building the first 3 buildings on the right. So that's what you will see. If you could stand outside this conference room and the oleanders weren't there, you would see our 3 buildings from the corner. It takes up about a third of the frontage along Hollister, and then the direct relief building in back. This is just a rendering of the corner of Lopez and Hollister. There's a patio, if in fact that is a coffee shop. It's some type of retail without a kitchen. It can serve coffee and sandwiches, but no kitchen is provided as part of the specific plan. That's kind of a picture. It's kind of hard to see that's stormwater retention, but there are basins that run along Hollister, and those are planted. There is a percolation trench that runs full length Hollister, so it's 1,000 feet long, 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep with rock. So that's part of the retention basin that we use for treatment on the project. When you drive by Hollister, I don't think you will say, oh, that's a retention basin. It will be fully landscaped and I think look pretty good. It's modeled after the basins that are on Ocean Road outside the Bren Center at UCSB, and they're beautiful. And this is what we modeled ours from as well.
It looked like wetlands.
Well, they will in the bottom of the basins. They will look like wetlands, I'm afraid, if we have rain, which we may not. So that's kind of an update. We're getting ready to award, and if we award on March 6, we're hoping to break ground in probably about tax day.
And completion by?
The contract period is 200 working days, so that's not quite a year.
And this construction project is funded by the revenue from the sale of the parcel to direct relief.
That's correct.
What would our return on investment be on this? How long will it take to recoup the $5 million from rents?
Well, since it's not a loan, we are using cash to pay for it. And then our plan that we presented to council would be to take half of the revenue that we generate from the lease of these buildings and put that in our development fund. And then as the rental accumulates, then we would, because we have permission to do the whole plan, and then we would just do the next building or the next couple of buildings once we have sufficient funding. So we want to continue to do it on a cash basis.
What would the total cost be for all of the buildings?
Based on what we've done, if we had 9 buildings?
Well, we bid 3, roughly, and we're at $5 million, so $15 million. We did get bids for 2 additional buildings. That was bid alternate 2 and 3, and those buildings are about 1 to 1.2 million. One of them contained a parking lot, the other didn't, but we're definitely, by starting and doing all the public improvements and the stormwater retention for the whole site, as we proceed, the buildings will be less expensive because we're also putting in all of the utilities for those buildings, all of, Edison, everything will be ready just to tie into those buildings once we have funding to start on them.
And the soil prep is being done for the entire parcel up front. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
Okay. So they're putting in the utilities, even though all the compaction and so forth hasn't been done?
We're in the flood zone here, so we will be raising the site elevation. And so what you'll see is the east side of the site where we build will be roughly 2 to 3 feet higher. It's going to match the grade of Becknell Road. And so if you think about it, we'll be putting all the utilities in to the east side of the street. All the water and sewer is stubbed behind the sidewalk of Wallace Becknell Road, just waiting for us. All of the power and communication will be just behind the sidewalk on Wallace Becknell Road. We're going down 24 inches from that grade, and then we're going to be filling in the future 3 feet. So it will be there waiting for us. We're not doing the soil prep, but we are putting in the utilities.
Along the perimeter, not into the parcel, basically.
Along the perimeter, yes, yes.
The Aero Camper Shell building would remain in this particular phase.
We could build 2 additional buildings with Aero Camper remaining. Once we go on to building 6, that would occupy space where they're located.
And what about the retention basin? Does that run, the one that you're building now, will that run all the way in front of Aero Camper?
It will, yes. It will also run up David Love and up Lopez.
Okay, and that'll be done without disrupting Aero Camper? Or
well, I can't say without disrupting, but it will be done, and they will be able to stay in business and access their site through the basins are planned to leave a driveway for them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So presumably this would have a pretty significant aesthetic improvement on that whole frontage there as well.
Absolutely, and also one of the, I think, benefits of doing the infrastructure is the sidewalk, because that is one of our goals, is to have sidewalk along the frontage of Hollister instead of the dirt path.
Could this retention basin be considered partial mitigation for the taxiway H paving?
Unfortunately not.
Well, that's a shame.
We all agree.
Other questions? All right, with that, we thank you for the good
Thank you very
report.
much.
And we move on to the director's report.
And there's not much more to tell you tonight. I did want to point out once again our passenger traffic for the month of January, notwithstanding all of the issues that month carried, we are still up 7%. And I'm really continue to be pleased to see those numbers grow. And one other item, just to kind of brag a little bit about marketing over here. We worked with TSA to bring in their pre-check approval, and we had more than 700 individuals go through and get clearance for the pre-check, get their credentials done. So that was a good community project, and we were really pleased to see that happen. So if you have questions of me, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, that concludes my report.
Do you have any idea as to why American dropped, everybody else went up and American dropped 4.5%?
I believe it was, they changed the equipment for the Dallas run to a smaller aircraft, and the seats weren't there. They're full, but they just had smaller airplanes. The big plane will come back, but they take it out during January and February and early March.
Okay. I'd like to just make a comment about the airport. My brother was visiting here last week, and so we decided to time something. So I dropped him off in front of the new terminal. I mean, the old terminal, rather, so he could go in that way and see how nice it looked. And started the clock. And he was through, checked bags and through security in 13 minutes.
Wow.
So that's one of the many reasons to fly out of Santa Barbara.
I think that should be part of our advertising program.
We do say easy come, easy go, so.
Right.
Question about the TSA, the pre-check program and the approvals, are they good for 5 years?
Yes, I believe they are.
And do we know what happens at the end of that? I'm assuming they will do some renewing for some more money, not a re-vetting of that.
I don't actually know the answer to that. Deanna, do you?
I haven't had pre-check long enough to get to 5 years yet, but I would presume that they're not going to let you go that easily.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'm curious, given the seemingly overwhelming success of that, are they planning a return engagement anytime soon?
Well, this is their second visit, right?
It is, yeah.
It's the second time that we've had them here, and I know that they're working in our region. They were up north as well. I can't remember if it was San Luis or Santa Maria. So the one thing that you can't do with the mobile units is get your international coverage for TSA. That has to be done down south. So, but I don't know if they'll be back, but we will encourage them to come back soon.
Yeah. Is there any possibility of seeing if Customs and Immigration will allow some kind of a vetting here? Because, of course, it's an awful lot of wasted gas for people who have to go to Los Angeles to get their interview.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
So, any other questions? Any further items on the director's report?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Well, I guess, do we need a motion to adjourn?
I was curious, how are things going with our solar project?
Jeff will respond.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, the solar provider is still waiting on geotechnical report results, which they've been waiting on for a few weeks now. So as soon as we get something back, they'll be able to move forward with their design.
All right.
Good. Any other questions, comments? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We can vote on it.
I don't think so.
Or I can just say we are adjourned. Thank you.